It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I stepped into Vintage Vibes, my favorite record store in the city. The place had that unmistakable scent, a mixture of old paper, dust, and nostalgia that always made me feel at home. The soft overhead lights cast a warm glow over rows and rows of vinyl records, their spines creating a colorful mosaic against the dark wooden shelves. Music played softly in the background, something from the late 70s that I couldn't quite place but felt familiar nonetheless. I loved how this place existed outside of time, a sanctuary where digital streaming services and algorithms couldn't reach me. I've been coming here every Friday for months, partly because of my growing vinyl collection, but if I'm being honest, also because of the growing emptiness in my apartment. At 28, I wasn't exactly where I thought I'd be. My friends were settling down, moving to suburbs, having kids, while I was still figuring things out. Music had always been my constant companion through life's uncertainties, and lately, I'd been gravitating toward the sounds of the past, perhaps seeking comfort in eras I never experienced firsthand but somehow felt connected to. Let me explain why vinyl matters so much to me. It's not just about the superior sound quality that audiophiles always talk about. It's about the ritual, selecting an album, carefully removing it from its sleeve, placing it on the turntable, and lowering the needle. It forces you to be present, to commit to the experience. In a world of endless scrolling and skipping tracks, vinyl demands your attention and rewards your patience. Each pop and crackle tells the story of the record's journey before it reached your hands. I find something deeply romantic about that. I was browsing through the new arrivals section, flipping through records with practiced ease, when I spotted it, an original pressing of Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. My heart actually skipped a beat. I'd been searching for this specific pressing for months. Just as I reached for it, another hand appeared from the opposite direction, our fingers brushing against the worn cardboard sleeve simultaneously. I looked up, startled by the contact, and found myself staring into the warmest brown eyes I'd ever seen. "Oh, sorry," he said with a smile that created a small dimple in his left cheek. He was about my height, with tousled dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. He wore a vintage band t-shirt under a well-worn denim jacket, the kind that takes years to break in perfectly. Great taste, though. This pressing sounds incredible. I nodded, suddenly aware that I should probably say something instead of just staring. "I've been looking for this one for ages," I managed, reluctantly pulling my hand back from the record. The original master on this pressing is supposed to be unmatched. He didn't immediately reach for the record, which surprised me. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying me with curious eyes. "I'm Alex," he said, extending his hand. "And I have a crazy suggestion. Instead of one of us walking away disappointed, what if we listen to it together?" The proposal caught me completely off guard. In the age of earbuds and personal playlists, who suggests listening to music together? Especially with a stranger? But there was something disarmingly genuine about his expression that made the idea seem less absurd by the second. I hesitated, weighing the invitation against my usual Friday night routine of takeout and Netflix. "I know it sounds weird," he continued, perhaps sensing my hesitation, "but music is meant to be shared, right? There's a coffee shop next door with a turntable set up. No pressure, just good music and maybe conversation if we feel like it." I found myself nodding before I had fully processed the decision. "I'm Daniel," I said, finally taking his extended hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and I noticed a small tattoo of a musical note on his wrist. "And you're right, music is meant to be shared." As we paid for the record, he insisted on splitting the cost. I felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness bubbling in my stomach. Was this a date? Just a friendly music appreciation session? I couldn't tell, and I wasn't sure which answer I was hoping for. It had been months since my last relationship ended, a 3-year commitment that dissolved when he accepted a job across the country. Since then, I've been cautious about opening up again. The coffee shop next door was called Needle Drop, and it perfectly complemented the record store's aesthetic. Vintage concert posters adorned exposed brick walls, and mismatched furniture created cozy nooks throughout the space. In the corner, just as Alex had mentioned, was a listening station with a turntable, amplifier, and 2 comfortable armchairs positioned side by side. "I come here a lot," Alex admitted as we settled into the chairs. The owner, Maria, is a music professor at the university. She believes in creating spaces where people can really listen, you know? I watched as he carefully removed the record from its sleeve, handling it by the edges with practiced precision. There was something intimate about watching someone else perform the same ritual I cherished. He placed the vinyl on the turntable and gently lowered the needle. As the opening notes of second-hand news filled our little corner, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to release. "So, Daniel," he said, leaning back in his chair and turning slightly toward me, "what's your story with Fleetwood Mac?" "Everyone has one." I smiled, appreciating the question. My parents played this album constantly when I was growing up. I think I absorbed it through osmosis before I even knew what the songs were about. When I got older and actually understood the lyrics, the heartbreak and tension behind them, it was like discovering the album all over again. I paused, realizing I was rambling. "What about you?" Alex's eyes lit up. "I discovered them during a pretty rough patch in college. My first real heartbreak. There's something about knowing that these beautiful songs came from such a messy situation, people breaking up but still creating together. It helped me see that something valuable can come from painful experiences." As the album played, our conversation flowed naturally between the music and our lives. I learned that Alex was a music teacher at a local high school, that he played guitar and piano, and that he had moved to the city just 8 months ago. He listened attentively when I talked about my work as a graphic designer, asking thoughtful questions about my creative process. With each track, we seemed to move our chairs slightly closer, until our knees were almost touching. During Dreams, I noticed Alex closing his eyes, completely absorbed in Stevie Nicks' haunting vocals. There was something vulnerable about watching someone lose themselves in music. It's like glimpsing a private moment. When he opened his eyes and caught me watching him, neither of us looked away. Something unspoken passed between us, an acknowledgement that we were sharing something more meaningful than just a casual listening session. "It's amazing how much emotion can be packed into a few minutes of music, isn't it?" he said softly. "That's why I teach music. I want kids to understand that feeling, that connection to something bigger than themselves." By the time The Chain was playing, we had moved on to sharing stories about concerts we'd attended, albums that had changed our lives, and the songs that had gotten us through difficult times. There's something uniquely revealing about discussing music with someone. Your tastes and experiences offer a window into your soul in a way that small talk never could. "Can I ask you something personal?" Alex said as side one of the album came to an end. He stood to flip the record, and I found myself watching the careful way his hands moved over the vinyl. "Sure," I replied, curious about what he wanted to know. He gently placed the needle at the beginning of side 2 before sitting back down. "How long have you been alone?" There's a certain look people get when they're used to experiencing things by themselves. I recognize it because I see it in the mirror. The directness of his question surprised me, but not in an uncomfortable way. It felt refreshing after months of surface-level dating app conversations. "Is it that obvious?" I asked with a small laugh. "My partner of 3 years moved across the country for work last spring. We tried the long-distance thing for a while, but—" I trailed off, shrugging. "Some things aren't meant to stretch that far, I guess." Alex nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I ended a 5-year relationship before moving here. He wanted different things, marriage, kids, suburbs. I wanted to keep exploring, growing. Neither of us was wrong, just incompatible in the long run. The confirmation that he was also interested in men sent a small thrill through me, though I tried not to show it. It's hard to know when to compromise and when to stand your ground," I offered. "Exactly," he agreed, leaning forward slightly. "And sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. But then I think about moments like this, spontaneous connections that wouldn't have happened if I'd taken a different path, and it feels right again." As You Make Loving Fun played in the background, I became increasingly aware of the chemistry building between us. It wasn't just our shared taste in music or the easy conversation. There was a physical pull that made me notice small details, the way his fingers tapped rhythmically against his knee, how he tucked his hair behind his ear when he was thinking, the slight cologne scent that reached me whenever he leaned closer to make a point about a particular lyric. When The Chain began playing, Alex suddenly lit up. "This bass line coming up is everything," he said, his enthusiasm contagious. As the famous bass solo kicked in, we both instinctively started moving to the rhythm, our eyes locked in shared appreciation. Without thinking, I reached out and touched his arm, a spontaneous gesture of connection in the moment. He didn't pull away. "You know," he said as the side was nearing its end, "I had tickets to see Fleetwood Mac 3 years ago, and no one to go with. My ex hated crowds and live music. I ended up selling the tickets." I shook my head sympathetically. "That's tragic. Music is meant to be experienced live." "Exactly," he exclaimed, his passion evident. "What about you? Any concert regrets?" "Too many to count," I admitted. "But mostly going to shows with people who were just there to say they went, not to really experience the music." There's nothing worse than being emotionally moved by a performance and turning to share that moment with someone who's scrolling through Instagram. Alex laughed, a genuine sound that made me want to hear it again. We would have been great concert buddies, he said, and there was something wistful in his tone that made me wonder if he was thinking about what could have been if we'd met earlier. As the album finished, we sat in comfortable silence for a moment, neither of us wanting to break the spell that had formed around our little listening corner. The coffee shop had grown busier around us, but in our shared bubble of music and conversation, it had been easy to forget about everyone else. I should probably get going, I finally said, though everything in me wanted to stay. I have some work to finish up tonight. It wasn't entirely true, but I was suddenly nervous about how much I was enjoying his company. Opening up again after being hurt wasn't easy, and I could feel myself building walls even as I wanted to tear them down. A flash of disappointment crossed his face, but he nodded. Of course. This was really nice, though. Thank you for humoring my strange suggestion. As we stood to leave, both reaching for the record at the same time again, our hands touched once more. This time, neither of us pulled away immediately. Maybe we could do this again sometime, he suggested, his voice casual but his eyes hopeful. I have a pretty decent vinyl collection at my place. Or we could check out that new record store that opened downtown. I hesitated, feeling the familiar fear of potential rejection or disappointment. What if this connection was just a one-time thing? What if getting to know him better revealed incompatibilities we couldn't see in a 2-hour listening session? But then again, what if it didn't? I'd like that, I said finally, surprising myself with my decisiveness. Here, let me give you my number. As we exchanged phones to input our contact information, our fingers brushed again, and I couldn't help but think about how this whole encounter had started with a similar touch over a vinyl record. There was something poetic about it, how the smallest moments can open doors to unexpected connections. Outside the coffee shop, the early evening air had grown cooler. We stood somewhat awkwardly on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to say goodbye. So, who gets custody of the record? I asked with a smile, nodding to the Fleetwood Mac album we'd purchased together. Alex considered this for a moment, then held it out to me. You take it home this time. It'll give me a reason to see you again. The simple statement carried more weight than its casual delivery suggested. It was an expression of intent, of wanting to continue whatever had started between us today. I took the record, our fingers connecting one more time in the exchange. Thank you for today, I said, meaning it more than he probably realized. It's been a while since I've connected with someone over music like this. Me too, he admitted. Most people don't really listen anymore, you know? They hear, but they don't listen. We stood there for another moment, both seemingly reluctant to end the encounter. Finally, Alex took a small step back. I should let you get to your work, but I'll text you. Maybe next weekend we could explore some more vinyl together. I nodded, already looking forward to it. I'd like that. As I walked home that evening, record tucked carefully under my arm, I couldn't stop replaying our conversation in my mind. There was something refreshingly authentic about how we'd connected. No carefully curated dating profiles, no rehearsed first date questions, just a genuine shared passion that had created space for something more to develop. When I got home, I immediately placed the record on my own turntable, smiling at the thought that just hours ago, these same songs had soundtracked the beginning of what felt like something significant. As Stevie Nicks sang about dreams, I found myself hoping that perhaps Alex and I might create some of our own. The text came just as Dreams was ending. Thanks again for today. Haven't enjoyed music that much in a long time. Looking forward to our next listening session. I smiled at my phone, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the temperature of my apartment. I typed back, same here. The album sounds even better knowing it brought us together. His response came quickly. That's the magic of vinyl. It has a way of connecting people across time and space. Good night, Daniel. As I prepared for bed that night, I found myself humming You Make Loving Fun, thinking about how unexpected life can be. Just that morning, I had been feeling lonely and disconnected, and now I was falling asleep with the prospect of a new connection, all because we both reached for the same record at the same time. 3 weeks later, Alex and I had established a routine of sorts. Every Friday evening, we would meet at one of our apartments, taking turns choosing albums to share with each other. Sometimes we would talk throughout, discussing lyrics and production techniques. Other times, we would listen in comfortable silence, simply experiencing the music together. Each session ended a little later than the one before, our conversations extending beyond music into deeper territories of hopes, fears, and dreams. It was during our fourth listening session, while exploring Joni Mitchell's Blue, that something shifted between us. We were sitting on the floor of my living room, backs against the couch, album lyrics spread out between us. As A Case of You played, Alex turned to me with an intensity one hadn't seen before. "This song always reminds me that love should be transformative," he said quietly. "It should change you, mark you in some way." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. But that's also what makes it scary, right? Letting someone affect you that deeply means being vulnerable. Worth the risk, though, don't you think? He asked, his eyes never leaving mine. In that moment, with Joni's voice filling the space between us, I felt the walls I'd built beginning to crumble. Without overthinking it, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when he responded by drawing me closer, something inside me seemed to click into place, like a needle finding the perfect groove in a record. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Alex smiled that dimpled smile that had first caught my attention in the record store. "I've been wanting to do that since Rumors," he admitted. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Me too. I just needed the right soundtrack, I guess." As our relationship developed over the following months, music remained at its center. We created playlists for each other, attended concerts together, and continued our vinyl exploration sessions. Each record we shared became another chapter in our story, another layer of understanding between us. Of course, it wasn't always perfect. We had our disagreements about music, about how much to share on social media, about how often to see each other. Alex was more spontaneous, while I needed structure. I was more open with my feelings, while he sometimes needed time to process his emotions. But we always found our way back to common ground, often through the shared language of music. 6 months after our first meeting, we decided to take a road trip to visit a famous record store 3 hours away. As we drove, singing along to a playlist we'd created together, I realized how much my life had changed since that fateful day in Vintage Vibes. I was happier, more open, more present. Music, which had once been my solitary comfort, had become a shared joy that enhanced every aspect of my life. "What are you thinking about?" Alex asked, noticing my contemplative mood as he drove. "Just how strange and wonderful it is that we both reached for the same record that day," I replied, reaching over to take his hand. "If either of us had come to the store an hour earlier or later, we might never have met." He squeezed my hand, glancing away from the road for just a moment to smile at me. "I like to think we would have found each other eventually. Some connections are just meant to happen." As we continued our journey, both literally on the road and figuratively in our relationship, I thought about how vinyl records were the perfect metaphor for what we were building together. Like a record, relationships have their scratches and imperfections. They require care and attention. They ask you to commit to the full experience rather than skipping to the highlights. And most importantly, they sound better when shared. When people ask us how we met, we always smile at each other before telling the story. We both reach for the same vinyl. One of us will begin, and the other will finish, and he asked if we could listen together. It's a simple beginning to what has become the most meaningful soundtrack of my life, one we continue to create together, one record at a time. Total_char_count, 18,762.